Hello and a very warm welcome to all of you. My name is Pratik and I'll be taking up the news today for 1st of November 2025. In the main news, the first news is India's quasi-federal structure faces challenges. So in this particular news, we'll be analyzing the idea of federalism and the concept of quasi-federal structure, and we'll also understand some of the key achievements and some of the challenges that India's federal structure faces. Second news, India-US signs 10-year framework for major defense partnership. So here we'll understand the context, understand the implications and the larger India-US defense relationship. Third news is about India Maritime Week 2025. Here we'll understand the significance of the maritime sector in India's economy, security and sustainability, and some of the measures or initiatives that India has undertaken to develop this particular sector. Fourth news, US to resume nuclear weapons testing. So here we'll understand the whole idea of various nuclear weapons treaties which prohibit the testing of nuclear weapons, and we'll understand the far-reaching implications of this move. Then in the fifth news, we'll talk about the 150th birth anniversary of Sardar Patel. So here we'll primarily understand the contribution of the Iron Man in terms of its pre-independence and post-independence contributions to the nation making. And in the sixth news, we'll discuss 150 years of the foundation of Arya Samaj. So here we'll understand the key ideas and ideologies of Swami Dayanand Saraswati and Arya Samaj, and we'll also understand the present relevance of Arya Samaj in the country, especially in the context of environment, in the context of culture, and in the context of social harmony. Then we'll discuss some quick updates. So in the first news, we have India's quasi-federal structure faces challenges. And this particular topic, of course, is from GS paper 2, that is Indian Polity and Governance. And the context for this news is that India's constitution is about to have its 76th anniversary of adoption. So in this context, one of the authors of this particular news piece has analyzed India's quasi-federal structure. So first of all, let us understand what exactly is the concept of federalism. So federalism is basically a concept of power sharing, and power sharing can happen in two forms. It can be a vertical fragmentation of power and horizontal fragmentation of power. And this concept was given by Montesquieu. So Montesquieu says that power should not remain in one entity because it is possible that that entity can become despotic and very difficult to control. So it is always a good idea to fragment or divide the power between different entities. So accordingly, there's a concept of division of power along the horizontal lines, which means that power is divided among the organs of the state. So the horizontal distribution of power is among various organs of states, such as legislative, executive, and judiciary. And this particular concept is called as separation of power, or SOP. And the vertical fragmentation of power is basically between the center on one hand and the states on the other hand. And here power can be fragmented through two means. One can be in terms of unitary way, or the second one could be in terms of federal means, right? So there are two ways of looking at things. So under the unitary concept, power is centralized in the center, and the power, whatever power is given to the states or the units, are because of the discretion of the center. On the other hand, a federal concept or a federal structure denotes that there is some sort of power distribution between center and state, and this distribution of power is not at the mercy or the discretion of the center. So federal structure means that there is some acute distribution of power, and that distribution of power is generally provided in the form of a written constitution. And whenever a dispute happens, there's an independent judiciary that can decide whether the power lies within the domain of center or whether it is lying in the domain of states. Now, within federalism, there's a concept of, or there are two models. One is holding together model, and the other one is coming together model. So countries like US can be considered as coming together model because the states generally came together and formed a union or a federation, right? On the other hand, the holding together model denotes that the center was first created and then it empowered the states. So India can be considered as an example of holding together. Now, when Indian federalism or even Indian constitution was there, then the debate was, what is the nature of Indian federalism? And one particular scholar, his name was Casey Ware, he called Indian federalism as quasi-federal or quasi-federalism. Now, this means that the nature of federalism in India is only for the sake of name, but in essence, India functions like a unitary government or a unitary political system. Now, the criticism of this was based on the fact that India has larger, or India has several unitary provisions as compared to federal provisions. And we'll look into some of the unitary provisions and the federal provisions as well. But with respect to the criticism of this, it was none other than Dr. Ambedkar who provided the clarification with respect to the Indian federal structure. So responding to a discussion in the Constituent Assembly, Dr. Ambedkar said that federalism is an idea which provides for partition of power between center and states, and that idea or that power is mentioned, is prescribed within a written constitution. And then there is an independent judiciary to investigate upon the claims of encroachment of power by center with respect to the domain of state. So far as federalism is concerned, Indian model of federalism is that there is that division of power is there and that power is mentioned in the constitution itself. So that was the argument given by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. As far as the claim that Indian federalism is a quasi-federalism, Dr. Ambedkar said that Indian federalism is a distinct model which maintains a balance between unity on one hand and provision for diversity on the other hand. Therefore, to the extent that is possible to ensure unity and uniformity and ensuring integrity, we have empowered the center, but at the same time, we have given enough provisions, enough flexibility to the state so that the states can function autonomously. In fact, the former Chief Minister of Bombay, Mr. B.R. Kher, also has mentioned that Indian federalism does not come because of the account of external pressure. In fact, the nature of Indian federalism accounts from the context of Indian independence movement, right? So the fact remains that Indian federalism is an account of sui generis, which means that it has come on its own accord. And here there are two things that are important, that Indian federalism is essentially a combination of shared rule along with self-rule, okay? So in that context, let us take a look into some of the federal provisions and some of the unitary provisions in the Indian Constitution. So with respect to the constitutional framework, we have a balance of power. So the federal features are, first, we have discussed that India has a written constitution. So it has written it down, or it has written it down all the powers of the center on one hand and the power of the states on the other hand in a compact document, so that there is no confusion with respect to the ambit of power of center and state. In fact, there is a separate schedule devoted to the separation of power, that is the 7th schedule, that provides the areas under which state can make laws and areas under which the center can make laws. Then we have dual polity, which means that on one hand we have Central Council of Minister, and then on the other hand we have State Council of Minister headed by the Chief Minister. So we have dual polity. Then we have bicameralism, which means that we have two houses at the center level. So we have the upper house and the lower house. So the upper house, also called as Rajya Sabha, is there to protect and preserve the interest of the states. And then we have division of powers, which is provided under the 7th schedule. So all of them, along with the provision of independent judiciary, which can use its original powers to adjudicate upon the dispute between centers and state, can be considered as some of the federal provision. So basically, federal provisions means those provisions which empower the state. Now we have unitary provision as well, as a result of which several scholars like Casey Ware has called India a quasi-federal. So first is that there is a strong center. Center has been given several administrative, legislative, and other power, financial power, right? In fact, the provision of financial powers is very much entrenched at the central level. So it is said that the constitution has created a very strong center. And the reason for this was because most of the scholars or the members of the Constituent Assembly were in favor of centralization because of the fact that the constitution was drafted at a time when India was undergoing a bloody partition, and also India's integration problems were also a concern. That is why India created a very strong state. Secondly, we also have a single citizen constitution and citizenship. So in countries like US, you have dual citizenship, where you are not just a member of or citizen of the entire country, but you are also a member of a particular state as well. Then parliamentary has authority over states, not just in the time of emergency. So under emergency, the parliament becomes empowered to legislate in the domain of state. At the same time, even during the normal circumstances, especially when there is an international agreement to be enforced, parliament becomes competent to enforce in the matters of state. Then in other provision, we have all India services, or we have provisions of governor, etc., which basically means that the center has a huge power imbalance as compared to the states, right? So what could be some of the challenges because of this? Especially the contemporary challenges related to the federal structure in the country. This essentially can be looked under three prisms. First is with respect to fiscal centralization, which means that most of the taxation policies are geared towards the center, right? So, for example, the implementation of GST, it has impacted the financial autonomy of the states. Why? Because many of the state-related taxes, such as state VAT or value-added taxes, were incorporated or were encroached or were taken up as part of the central GST, right? So here what it means that states have given up their fiscal sovereignty for the ensuring that there is some sort of uniform market in the country. Then administrative and political centralization. This happens because of several tools like emergency provision, with the use of governor, with the use of all India services. But more recently, we saw this played out during the COVID times, especially when the center used the Disaster Management Act during the COVID-19 to impose nationwide pandemic or nationwide lockdown with minimal state consultation, right? So this showed that states are essentially at the mercy of center. In fact, even the policy of demonetization was undertaken by the center without any consultation from the states. Then, with respect to other aspects such as reservation of bill by the governor for presidential assent, devolution of taxes and revenues by the Finance Commission, etc., are some of the current fiscal or challenges with respect to the federal structure. At the same time, there are several achievements as well. And if you look at the achievements, we can say that there has been some sort of unity and unity in terms of national integration or national economic integration in terms of a unified market, especially GST reforms. Then we can say that there have been several initiative or success in policy domains, especially with respect to the pulse polio control or pulse polio mission that was successful. So we also have a principle of cooperative federalism, whereby the center and states are not looked at in the form of adversary, but in terms of a part of Team India. And also we have other achievements as well, where the disputes have been resolved amicably using the platforms such as interstate council and with respect to the Supreme Court's judgment, right? So these are some of the achievements with respect to the Indian federal structure. Now, what could be the way ahead? The way ahead could be that we need to use institutions like Niti Aayog, like GST Council, and we need to embody the concept of Team India, which means that India is a team of center and states, and we should not be looking at these entities as adversarial players, right? So we should be bringing together the center and states as equal partners in the process of nation building. It can help address the emerging developmental challenges such as cyber security, disaster management, etc. And it can evolve as a balance between unity and regional autonomy. That is the whole crux of federalism, right? So with respect to PYQs, a lot of questions have come from these topics, not just at the mains level, but also at the prelims level. But this particular question is exactly pertaining to what we have covered in this particular discussion, which is, though the federal principle is dominant in our constitution, and the principle is one of the basic features. Now tell me, under which Supreme Court judgment it was held that federalism is a basic feature of the constitution? But it is equally true that federalism under the Indian constitution leans in favor of strong center, a feature that militates against the concept of strong federalism discussed, right? So we have already discussed major arguments with respect to this particular question. Next topic is India-US sign 10-year framework for major defense partnership. And this topic is part of GS paper 2, international relations. So in the international relations, we need to look into the major developments or major bilateral developments with respect to any agreement, right? So this is one of the example of agreement. And this agreement or this framework was signed in the backdrop of or sidelines of 12th ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting plus ADMM plus in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Now, this comes in the context or in the backdrop of several developments. First development is that recently we saw that US and China had some sort of cool down of relationship in terms of Donald Trump raising or relaxing the tariffs, and then China also restricting or putting a check or release or relaxing the ban on the trading of rare earth elements. So in a way, it signaled some sort of relaxing of ties between US and China. That is, and they have used an expression called G2, sort of G2, right? Then the other thing is that China and Pakistan, of course, are allies, but even now, US is also attracting or getting towards Pakistan, right? So in a way, US is moving towards Pakistan and India is already there with respect to Russia, right? So India has good relationship with Russia, and at the same time, US is putting pressure on India to reduce its oil and defense trade from Russia. Then there is problem with India and US with respect to what? With respect to trade deals, where Donald Trump has imposed 50% sanctions with respect to India on the bilateral trade. So this development comes in that context, which means that this could be looked as one of the positive development with respect to India-US relationship, which has earlier been very much in the negative news, right? So what could be the implication of this? The implication of this would be that this shows a very good signaling as far as India-US relationship is concerned, even though this particular framework is not revealed what exactly is going to be the components or the details of this particular framework. but it is very much clear that there is some sort of consensus in terms of that India and US are supposed to have some sort of clear objectives and complementarity of objectives, especially in the Indo-Pacific region. So remember that US requires India as a regional balancer. Regional balancer in which area? In the Indo-Pacific area, and especially in the context of rise of China. Whereas for India, the problem is not just about the maritime balancing. For India, the problem is also of continental balancing. So US can be a good ally as far as the maritime balancing is concerned. But as far as continental balancing is concerned, it cannot just rely on US. It has to build up its own reserves. It has to develop Atmanirbharta in defense. At the same time, it has to diversify its export. So what is the signaling from this is that now India and US are clearly evolving from the buyer-seller relation, and now they are moving into the domain of joint production, technology transfer, and involvement of private sector. So this is the whole crux of this particular news. So what we need to understand is what exactly is the dimension or what exactly is the nature of India-US relation. So this can be analyzed under 4 framework. First is with respect to the institutional and the foundational agreement that basically are the ways through which India and US are cooperating in principle. So first thing is that we have an apex or at the highest level, we have 2+2 ministerial dialogue. Then at the foundational pact, first we have logistics exchange, and this is done through LEMOA, that is Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, LEMOA, that was signed in 2016. And the purpose is that both of them can ensure and use the logistics of each other for any purpose. The second one is with respect to communication compatibility, that is Communication Compatibility and Security Agreement, that is COMCASA, that was signed in 2018, allowing India to acquire secure communication equipments. The third one is Industrial Security Agreement, ISA, that was signed in 2019. This enables the private players as well to participate in the defense pact or defense supplying. Fourth one, which was very much controversial and took a lot of time for both of these countries to negotiate, that was BECA, that is Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement. It was signed in 2020, facilitating the exchange of geospatial information. Now, this is the first pillar. Then we have 3 more pillars. The second pillar is strategic and policy pillar. So first, US has designated India as major defense partnership. Now, the significance of this designation is that now India can be provided with sophisticated weapons and other defense equipments. The second thing is to provide or to facilitate the trade. US has granted India a status called STA Tier 1, that is Strategic Trade Authorization, STA Tier 1 status in 2018. Now, this is a higher way in which that not just the defense equipment, but those which are important for strategic objectives, that could also be provided to India. The third one is with respect to operational interoperability, which essentially means that if you are providing defense equipment, it is essential that the armies or the defense personnel of these different countries are able to use them effectively and work in a singular manner. For this, we have bilateral exercises such as Yuddha Abhyas for Army, Vajra Prahar for Special Forces, and COPE India for Air Force. At the multilateral level, the most famous exercise is known as Malabar exercise, which is done by the navies of India, US, Japan, and Australia, all of them part of Quad. And this is particularly important to signal a unifying command with respect to Indo-Pacific region. And the next one, the last pillar is defense industry and technology. This signals that defense is acquiring a new importance as far as India-US relations is concerned. So if you look at the defense trade in India in the early 2000s, it was near about 0 billion. It did not exist at all. But now the defense procurement exceeds $20 billion. The second thing is, now we are also going for technology transfer and technology push. So we have Defense Industrial Cooperation Roadmap to fast track technology and co-production, which is a new element of India-US relationship, especially in defense domain. Then for innovation also, we have IndusX, that is India-US Defense Acceleration Ecosystem, and this is to link the startups and industries. Then we have new initiatives such as Autonomous Systems Industry Alliance, that is ASIA, to increase the industrial partnership and production of autonomous systems in the Indo-Pacific regions, right? So this is the development. We still need to understand that even though our defense relationship with US is on the rise, we still cannot neglect our other defense relationships, especially with Russia, because we cannot completely rely on US. Secondly, we also need to increase our indigenization of the defense products, and we need to also have several other pacts with other countries, right? So from the PYQ, there was a comparison between India-US defense relationship with respect to India-Russia defense relationship. So the question was, what is the significance of Indo-US defense deals over Indo-Russian defense deals? Discuss with reference to the stability in the Indo-Pacific region. So as we have already discussed, US is more concerned about two things. US wants to sell its weapons, and second, US wants to make sure that that China does not emerge as a major power, especially in the Indo-Pacific region, because of the fact that Indo-Pacific region is a theater of geoeconomics and geopolitics, right? So US basically needs India for two things. One is to sell its weapon, and second, to contain China. But for India, it is important that India has several adversaries, not just with respect to China, but also it has to maintain and ensure that Pakistan also does not acquire too much power. So for this, India also requires Russia, so that the historical weapons and the defense trade that it had with Russia does not fall down, and it has already shown that several of its air defense system were really effective during the Operation Sindoor. So here we have to understand the limitation of Indo-US defense relation and also some of the merits of the India-Russia defense pacts. So even though there is a higher trend with respect to the increase in India-US defense trade, but at the same time, we cannot downplay Indo-Russia defense deals, right? The third news is with respect to India Maritime Week 2025. And this was in news because this particular event, it secured an investment of 12 lakh crore, and under this particular event, several initiatives were also announced. And here the key announcement, which was called as Maritime Amrit Kal Vision 2047. So firstly, there was an emphasis on indigenous shipbuilding capacity. Oil and gas PSUs have launched 59 shipbuilding orders worth 47,800 crore. Numbers are not required, but what exactly has happened is that first is that there is focus on indigenous. So again, there is a component of Atmanirbharta, self-reliance, that is visible even in the maritime domain, right? Second is Shipping Corporation of India, SCI, has set a target of 216 vessels by 2047 with an investment of rupees 1 lakh crore. So what exactly it means? That the shipbuilding capacity is to be built, and then there is focus on modernization plus development of ships, of shipping ecosystem. Okay. So basically these are the key announcements. So again, if you look at the key vision of the Amrit Kal or Maritime Amrit Kal vision, it focuses on three things. First is the perspective of economic growth, that is prosperity. Second is with respect to security. And third is with respect to sustainability, which means that the economic growth and security should come hand in hand with the environmental sustainability and ensuring that the sustainable development goals such as SDG 14 can also be materialized. And the initiatives are also relatively less carbon emission uh, are there, right? So here we need to understand a couple of things, such as what is the importance of the maritime sector in the country. So the importance here lies from the fact that 90% of trade by volume and 70% of trade by value is done through the shipping routes or through the maritime route. This highlights the critical nature of the maritime route or the maritime sector. So it is important that we put a lot of emphasis on this sector, because historically India in a way had neglected the maritime sector. India was largely a continental power, but it was under the British rule that they realized that perhaps we need to also use the seas as some sort of ventures of defense. So most of the times, sea or the maritime sector were looked at as an arena of security and defense. But lately, India has also realized that we should also look at it from the perspective of not just security, but also from the perspective of prosperity, that is economic growth, employment, and also to ensure that there is some sort of sustainability or environmental protection, right? So here, let's talk about the key achievements of the India's maritime sector. First, we have already discussed the criticality or the centrality to the Indian economy with respect to its contribution to trade. That is 95% of India's trade by volume moves via sea. Second is that the port capacity has been doubled to 2762 million metric tons per annum, that is TPA, 2025 from 1400 TPA. So the port capacity has almost doubled in this timeline. Then the turnaround time has reduced from 93 hours to 48 hours, almost half, right? So turnaround time has halved, but the port capacity has increased. Then the workforce is tripled to 3 lakhs, which is almost 12% of global share. So India is among top 3 globally seafarer countries in the world in terms of the employment or the people who are employed in this particular sector. Then in terms of the legislative reforms, several new initiatives have been undertaken recently in 2025 itself. For example, the Merchant Shipping Act of 2025. So what exactly is Merchant Shipping Act 2025? It basically talks about the guidelines for the transportation of goods and passengers from India to the world and vice versa. And this is to ensure that the earlier rules that were there during the British era are replaced by modern rule, and the routes are, there is better protection, there is digitization and better governance. Same with respect to Coastal Shipping Act. So coastal shipping will be applicable for the inland waterways and for the shipping from or within the Indian coast region, right? So here again, the emphasis is on digital integration. It is on ensuring that center and states are in harmony, and it is also for better use of technology. And with respect to Indian Ports Act, the whole emphasis is on port modernization, port development, and to ensure that there is a coordination between center and state along with integration of technology. So these are some of the key achievements with respect to the maritime sector recently. Now, if you look at the other initiatives that India has taken in terms of the schemes and the plans to boost the maritime sector, we have these couple of schemes. So the first one is the Maritime India Vision 2030. So this essentially identifies 10 important themes to shape India's journey towards becoming a global maritime power. So it includes areas like port infrastructure, logistics, efficiency, etc. Second, we have Maritime Amrit Kal vision, which we were discussing earlier. So it talks about, it aims over 70 lakh crore of investment. So this is primarily with respect to financial securing of things for shipbuilding, cruise tourism, skill development. So it has a very large scope, essentially for modernization. Third is Sagarmala program, which is to focus on cutting logistics cost, creating employment, and connecting several ports and ships, right? So this is essentially a very important development. Then there is another program called the Green Tug Program to deploy 100 eco-friendly tugs by 2040. So tugs are nothing but sort of connector where the larger ships pushes or pulls down the smaller ship. So the problem was earlier they were not environmentally sustainable. So now there is a green tug program that provides for eco-friendly tugs. Then with respect to maritime security, we have the framework which includes the Mahasagar Doctrine. So earlier we have Sagar Doctrine, that was security and growth for all in the region. This has now been translated to Mahasagar with a focus on the global south. Next, we also have Act East policy, where we have increased the domain, not just limited to ASEAN, but also to the entire Indo-Pacific. And we have Indian Ocean Naval Symposium, etc. So these are some of the initiatives that India has taken to empower the maritime sector. Next news, US President announced that US would be resuming the nuclear weapons testing, and this would be part of GS Paper 2, International Relations. The news comes in the context of recent Russia's decision, or Russia has recently tested a nuclear capable and nuclear deployed missile system that was a cruise missile. And the important thing with respect to that missile was that it was competent, or it was capable to break down even the US Golden Dome infrastructure. So that is why US has got into this frenzy that it wants to now start with the nuclear testing. Even though Russia has later clarified that it is the particular missile is not nuclear capable, right? So at the same time, still US would be, or as per the decision of Mr. Donald Trump in his social media site called Truth Social, he has said that the US will be resuming testing nuclear weapons after a gap of 33 years, right? So here what is the importance is, what could be the implication of this decision? We don't know the reason. Reason could be it is prompted by the Russian military or test, or the nuclear testing, or that particular cruise missile. But what is interesting, or what is important, is the implication of this move. So definitely it is going to lead to nuclear arms race. How? So if US is testing nuclear weapons, perhaps it will also prompt China to do the same. If China is testing nuclear weapons, then India will not be far behind, because India has some sort of security challenge with respect to China. In fact, India gave China as the reason for its nuclear weapon testing way back in 1998. So India will be compelled to go for nuclear testing. If India is going for nuclear testing, then definitely Pakistan will not be far behind. And this will lead to a huge nuclear arms race. Countries will start testing their nuclear weapons, and it will lead to huge weaponization or nuclearization of the entire, not just subcontinent, but the entire world. The second thing, that it will also be detrimental for the nuclear arms prohibition treaties. So the New START treaty that is between India, Russia and US. So by the way, Russia and US have 90% of the nuclear warheads. So therefore, they have a pact within them that they will not be testing, or they will not be using these nuclear weapons for testing purpose. In fact, there is CTBT as well. So this particular move is going to also have a negative implication as far as nuclear arms testing is concerned. Nuclear arms prohibition is concerned. And more the treaties which are already fragile in nature will not be able to hold down these superpowers. Lastly, the other implication is that because of other emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, bioweapons, etc., it can be fused with nuclear technologies, right? And it could lead to hybrid warfare of a proportion that could create a lot of havoc in the entire world wherever it is taken. So we already know that there is several wars, different wars that are ongoing currently. Now, with the adoption of the nuclear uh, aspect again with this, it can have a huge consequence for the world to come, right? So these could be some of the potential implication. So from the perspective of the static, which is relevant here, we need to look into some of the treaties which are relevant from this perspective, from the arms control perspective, or which are nuclear in nature. So the first one, that the most important treaty from the perspective of nuclear non-proliferation is NPT, which came in 1968 and came in force in 1970. It has 191 countries as signatories, except India, Israel, Pakistan, South Sudan. The purpose is to prevent the spread of nuclear weapons and weapons technology and promote cooperation. So proliferation means spread. And the whole idea is that there is, as per the treaty, there are certain nuclear weapon states and there are certain non-nuclear weapon states till the time of 1967. So after 1967, any country which gets nuclear weapon will not be considered as nuclear weapon states. Therefore, it restricts the nuclear weapon states only to those countries which had acquired nuclear weapons by 1967. So the reason why India has not signed this treaty is because it is discriminatory in nature, and because of the fact that there are the countries, like the five countries, the P5 countries, are allowed to retain or test their nuclear weapons, but the rest of the countries are not allowed to have nuclear weapons. At the same time, this treaty provides, or it instructs the nuclear weapons to spread the nuclear technologies to the non-nuclear countries for civilian purpose. The second important one is INF, that is Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces. It came in the year 1986-7, and the parties of this was US and the erstwhile USSR. And this eliminated the ground-launched missiles. So the range for 500 to 5,500 kilometer range, that was banned. Third one is Strategic Arm Reduction Treaty. Again, it was in 1991 and expired in 2009. It was with US and Russia. It limited deployed strategic nuclear warheads to 6,000 and 1,600 delivery vehicles. Then CTBT, that is Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Now, this particular move by Donald Trump to test the nuclear weapon is in direct violation of the CTBT that was signed in the year 1996. It has 187 signatories, 178 ratified. So India has not signed it. Again, it says that even though the treaty prohibits all nuclear testing or explosions for any purpose in a physical mode, but it does not prevent the simulation of the testing, which the competent countries or the nuclear weapon countries can do, because they have the computer programming that can allow them to test all the weapons. So because of this hypocrisy, India has refrained from signing and ratifying this particular treaty. Then the New START Treaty is, it came in force in 2000 and it is going to be in force till February 2026. It is between US and Russia. It limits deployed strategic warheads to 1,550 and delivery system to 700. Then another treaty is Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW. It came in the year of 2017 and there are 95 signatories and 74 state parties. India, Pakistan, etc. have not signed. It bans possession, development, use or threat of nuclear weapons. Right, so it's a very progressive state. In fact, the organization that was responsible for drafting this also got Nobel Peace Prize as well. Right. So these are some of the treaties that we should keep in mind, which can be asked not just as part of the mains exam, but also in prelims exam. Next important news is Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel was remembered on his 150th birth anniversary. And this topic can be part of GS Paper 1 History, where we need to know about the contribution of various personalities involved in the Indian national movement. And it is also important from the perspective of culture, right? So, as we all know, that Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel is known as the Iron Man of India, right? So, he was born on 31st October 1875 in Gujarat in a peasant family. His birth anniversary is celebrated as Rashtriya Ekta Divas, National Unity Day, for unifying hundreds of princely states and laying the foundation of an integrated India. So right when India was partitioned, or when India was given independence, there were 565 princely states in the country. And these states were given three choices. They either have to go with India, or they have to accept the sovereignty of India, or they have to go with Pakistan, or they can exercise independence. So by the time India achieved independence, more or less all of the states had succumbed or had subscribed to the Indian sovereignty, except three states. And these states were Hyderabad, Jammu and Kashmir, and Junagadh. These states did not want to join the Indian Union. Hyderabad, the Nizam of Hyderabad either wanted to join Pakistan or remain independent. But Hyderabad was in very critical area of the country. So India could not allow Hyderabad to be part of Union of Pakistan. More importantly, people of the Hyderabad also wanted to be part of India. Therefore, an operation was undertaken by Sardar Patel in the name of Operation Polo, which was a military or a police action under which the Razakars were defeated. Razakars were the bodyguards or the militia of the Nizam, and then Hyderabad was integrated in India. Then Jammu and Kashmir, we all know that instrument of accession was signed following the tribal invasion that was supported by Pakistan. So this support was provided to the state of Jammu and Kashmir only under the compulsion that it joins India within the instrument of accession. Then in Junagadh, there was a plebiscite done and the people decided to join India, right? So he had a very seminal impact as far as unifying the country is concerned, right? And he showed a huge sense of maturity, some diplomacy and courage in achieving this objective. And because of the fact that he played a seminal role in preventing the balkanization of India, he is also associated with the term that he is very much a unifying factor for the country, and therefore his birthday is celebrated as National Unity Day. So he was a lawyer, so his profession was barrister, and he was later turned to public service during India's independence struggle. He was particularly inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, and especially all the movements that Mahatma Gandhi undertook, especially in Gujarat, such as Kheda, Ahmedabad Mill Strike, or the Bardoli Satyagraha. Sardar Patel was instrumental in all of these protests, right? So let us take a look into his contribution in the Indian, in the pre-independence era. So what exactly was his major contribution? So he provided leadership in early Gandhian movements, emerged as a national leader in 1918 by participating in the Kheda Satyagraha and in the Ahmedabad Mill Strike. Secondly, he was also very much instrumental in the Bardoli Satyagraha in the 1928, which was basically coinciding with the non-cooperation movement. So within this, he led a non-violent protest by peasants against unjust land revenue hikes, where he was given the title of Sardar. So the term Sardar or leader, it comes from the women who were participating in the Bardoli Satyagraha. So in the Bardoli Satyagraha, what happened was that the British officials had hiked the land revenue in an unjust manner. So that hike was reduced because of his organization skills and because of his experience as a lawyer. He was also a president of the Indian National Congress during the Karachi session of 1931, and he adopted the resolution on fundamental rights and national economic policies. Now, let us take a look at his contribution after independence or post independence. So, we have already discussed that he was an architect of political integration in the country. He swiftly unified more than 500 princely states, which were around 565, through various means, a combination of diplomacy, force, etc. Junagadh was combined to India through plebiscite or through voting, Hyderabad through Operation Polo, and Kashmir or Jammu and Kashmir through instrument of accession. Then in terms of internal stability, he was the first deputy prime minister and also the first home minister of India. He stabilized the administration during the bloody partition that India witnessed. He maintained order and communal violence, ensured that the communal violence was not harming the refugee inflows, and he was able to manage it very effectively. Third, that he was also very much instrumental in giving shape to the Indian civil services. So there was a huge disagreement between Patel and Nehru with respect to what to do with the Indian administrative or the Indian civil services. So people said that the Indian civil services were neither Indian nor civil, and they did not behave like servants, right? So they did not provide any service. But Sardar Patel was of the opinion that the whole reason why the Britishers were able to perpetuate for a very long period of time was because of the contribution of the ICS officer, because they were really good at their job in terms of tax collection, in terms of maintaining law and order, etc. So he was in the favor of retaining the ICS officer, yet he wanted them to change their name, not just the name from ICS to IAS, but also to orient them towards service, right? So he established the All India Service, including the Indian Administrative Service and the Indian Police Service, and he gave a very seminal speech in the academy, where he said that the Indian civil services or the Indian administrative service are a steel frame of the country, right? And he ensured he wanted them to be professional, neutral for national unity. In fact, several Indian civil servants such as VP Menon and others, the first election commission of India, were very much instrumental in ensuring the unity and the democracy of the country. So if we can also learn a lot from his personality in terms of integrity, in terms of leadership, patriotism, courage, determination, etc. Right? Now, from the perspective of exam, UPSC from the personalities have asked question like this: discuss the contribution of Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad to pre and post independent India. Same kind of question can also be coming or can come with respect to Sardar Patel as well. Second question: trace India's consolidation process during the early phase of independence in terms of polity, economy, education, and international relations. So here, with respect to the political consolidation, we can definitely refer to the work of Sardar Patel, right? The next news is Prime Minister highlights contribution of Arya Samaj on the 150 years of its foundation. This again can be connected to GS paper 1 history, where we have socio-religious movements, and it can also be connected to the culture part, art and culture part. So as far as this topic is concerned, this was a part of socio-religious, Arya Samaj was a part of socio-religious movement in the 19th century. And here the founder of this movement, Arya Samaj, was Dayanand Saraswati. So Dayanand Saraswati's original name was Mool Shankar, and from his childhood age itself, he was very much against the ideas of superstition, about the domination of the priest, about the rituals, about idol worshipping, etc. So he wanted to have some sort of an organization that would promote rational ideas, scientific ideas, equality, etc. And that is why he founded Arya Samaj in 1875. So what are the key ideas of Arya Samaj? So first thing is that it was a religious reform uh, initiative, reformist initiative, in a way that he understood, the founders of the Arya Samaj understood that the religion, the society cannot change unless the religion which gives sanctity to several practices in society are changed, right? For example, Arya Samaj denounced idol worship, ritualistic worship, preached respect and reverence for the other human beings. In fact, Saraswati was very much a proponent of the infallible authority of Vedas. He considered Vedas to be the ultimate repository of knowledge. And he said, he gave a slogan that we must go back to Vedas because Vedas contain the eternal truth. And if only we followed the guidance provided in Vedas, we will be having several benefits, right? Then there was, apart from the religious reforms, it also contained several social reforms. So, as part of that, the Arya Samaj opposed caste as hereditary. It said that caste cannot be considered by birth, but it can be perpetuated, but it should be seen from the perspective of occupation. Then he also denounced untouchability and advocated Vedic education for all caste. He was against child marriage, forced widowhood, and campaigned for women's education. Then there was another initiative for educational reforms. For example, DAV schools, DAV Dayanand Anglo-Vedic. So Dayanand Anglo means English, right? English and Vedic. So it was a combination of the scientific learning as well as the cultural or Vedic learning. The trust was formed in 1886 to impart scientific and modern education while imbibing the cultural moorings. Freedom movement, some prominent members included the freedom fighters such as Lala Lajpat Rai, Bhagat Singh, Ram Prasad Bismil, Madan Lal Dhingra, Swami Shraddhanand, Sachindranath Sanyal, etc. So it attracted members from different spectrums of ideology. At the same time, there were some challenges with respect to the adherence to Vedas, and some of the controversies included the Shuddhi movement. So sometimes it also led to communal clashes as well. So despite these contributions, it was not bereft of challenges as well. So what can we learn from this, or what is the contemporary relevance of Arya Samaj? So first is that its emphasis on social equality continues to have its relevance presently, because it opposed casteism and untouchability. It essentially echoes India's constitutional values of equality and justice. Second, gender empowerment. The Arya Samaj advocated women's education and rights. It aligns with schemes like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, that is the 106th Amendment, which seeks to provide one-third reservation of women to the parliament and the state legislative assemblies. Then we have education and rationalism. DAV institutions continue its legacy of scientific and moral education. It supports scientific temper, which is part of the fundamental duty under Article 51A, Clause H. Then it also promotes ethical living over rituals, aids interfaith harmony, living in harmony with nature. In fact, PM Modi has also mentioned that Arya Samaj can also be looked as in terms of the recent initiative that India has undertaken, such as this Mission Life, that is lifestyle for environment, or it can also be combined with Gyan Bharatam initiative. So Gyan Bharatam is to preserve the ancient manuscripts, right? And to digitize all the ancient manuscripts. So maybe the works of the Arya Samaj leaders such as Dayanand Saraswati in the form of books like Satyat Prakash could be digitized, and it could also be spread so that his message could be received to the young population, right? So these could be some of the contemporary relevance. So in the places in news, we have Baltic Sea. So Poland intercepts another Russian plane over the Baltic Sea. So this is the third time when Poland has intercepted a Russian plane over the Baltic Sea. And interestingly, this time the Russian plane did not violate the sovereignty, the air sovereignty of the spatial sovereignty of Poland. At the same time, this becomes important because it indicates that the Russia Ukraine war is not merely a bilateral affair, it can also include the third party as well. So, in this context, let's take a look into the location of Baltic Sea, which is situated in northern Europe. So, this is Baltic Sea. You can see this is the Baltic Sea. The bordering countries are Sweden. So, this is Sweden. And if we go anti-clockwise, this is Poland. And then you have Lithuania. Then you have Latvia, Estonia, and Finland. Then it also sides with Denmark, and it also has its border with Russia as well, right? So it is connected to the Atlantic Ocean through the Danish Straits, and it is cited as the world's largest brackish inland water body. Why? Because its water salinity levels are lower compared to that of the world oceans due to the inflow of fresh water from the surrounding and land and the sea's shallowness, right? So this is all about the Gulf, the Baltic Sea, right? Make sure that you locate this in your atlas. In the quick updates, the first one is about Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC. So why this was in news? Because the 2025 summit was recently held in the South Korean city of Gyeongju, right? So what about the APEC? APEC was founded in 1989 during a time when globalization was just starting to have its effects felt across various countries, right? And APEC during this time was a center of several economic growth and development because it contained all the major rising economies like Southeast Asia that were known as Asian tigers, right? So it was, the secretariat is Singapore. This signifies that how important the Southeast Asian nations were in the whole ecosystem of APEC. It has 21 economies. So here the members are called as economies, which means that in order to be a member of APEC, you don't need to be a sovereign country. So that is why even Taiwan could be a member of this as well, right? So Australia, Canada, Chile, China, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, Mexico, US, etc. are part of this, right? And India is not a member of this. India has an observer status. Objective is to build a dynamic and harmonious Asia Pacific community by championing free and open trade and investment, promoting economic integration, cooperation, etc. So it is largely an economic cooperation bloc, right? Savings rate. So why this was in news? Because the chairperson of the EACPM, what is EACPM? Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, he has said that India's investment rate needs to rise to 34 to 35% to get 7% growth, which is largely financed through savings and foreign investment. So the story is that we know that GDP is C plus I plus G plus X minus M. Okay. So what is GDP? This is a calculation through the consumption or through the expenditure model. So C essentially stands for the consumption expenditure, I for investment, G for government spending, X minus M is net export. So in order for GDP to rise, we need to also increase the investment. Why? Because in a way, consumption, government spending, and export is facing problem with respect to the global headwinds in terms of the tariff imposition by US, and because of the general preference of offshoring and nearshoring. So trade is if you look at the trade figures in the contribution of trade in Indian economy or Indian GDP, it roughly contributes to 20% of Indian GDP. But if you look at the domestic consumption, it roughly contributes to the 80% of Indian GDP. So this can be essentially boosted if the investment rate is also accelerated. So as of now, the investment rate in the country is close to 31 to 32%, or maybe 30 to 31%. This needs to go to 34 to 35% so that India can get a sustained 7% growth, right? Now, what is savings rate? So what is the relationship between saving and investment? So saving translates into investment. So if you have, say, if your gross earning is rupees 100 and your consumption expenditure is 90 rupees, it means that your saving is rupees 10. Okay. And that saving can go into investment in the sense that it can be used for, say, mutual fund. It could be used as a contribution to, say, EPFO or anything. So the saving rate predominantly determine your investment. So here it is basically consisted of the household savings, plus it also includes foreign investment. So generally in India, you'll say that the investment rate is slightly higher than the savings rate. And this is because the savings rates of the household savings rate is not enough to finance the development or the GDP of the country. Therefore, there is a requirement of foreign investment as well. So saving rate is the amount of GDP that is saved by the household, businesses, and the government. It is calculated as the difference between the disposable income and the final consumption expenditure. India's saving rate is close to 30.2%. So UPSC also asked a PYQ from this topic. Among several factors for India's potential GDP growth, savings rate is most effective one. Do you agree? What are the other factors available for growth potential? So this matter was also covered severely or significantly in the economic survey that talked about the whole usage of savings rate or the investment growth with respect to the GDP growth of the country. So apart from these instruments, we also need to attract foreign investment. We also need to work on improving the logistics, infrastructure, etc. Next, excise in news. We have excise Trishul, where India has launched excise Trishul, which is what? A major tri-service drill along the western border with Pakistan across Gujarat and Rajasthan. In fact, Pakistan has sent an advisory to its citizens near this area to be careful, because it fears that maybe there could be something of the nature of Operation Sindhu directed towards it, right? So what about Operation Trishul? It is to comprehend joint operational capability and strategic preparedness of Indian Army, Navy, and the Air Force. And what is the purpose? It is going to serve as a platform to demonstrate the indigenous defense system, right? So how the indigenous, or those which are built in India, are being integrated into India's operational framework. So very important endeavor. Baltic Sea we have already discussed. Iberian lynx. So world's first ever white Iberian lynx was spotted in Spain. So what about Iberian lynx? So it looks like a fox. The IUCN status is vulnerable. IUCN green status of the species is largely depleted. Under the CITES, it is under Appendix 1. Habitat, mosaic, or a combination of dense scrub of shelter and open pasture for hunting. And interestingly, rabbit abundance is the essential component of the Iberian lynx habitat. What is the behavior? It is largely, it is crepuscular in nature, which means that it sleeps during the day, and it is nocturnal in nature. That is, it is mostly active during the night, but it can also be seen active during the day as well. So what are the major threats? So interestingly, the major threat is the depletion of rabbit population. So the areas which does not have rabbit, you'll see that they are perishing. The Iberian lynx will be perished from those areas. Apart from that, there is habitat loss, fragmentation of the habitat, disease transmission, low genetic diversity, poaching, etc. Alphen waves. So this news is important from the fact that we must understand, and this was a recent study that was conducted to check or to understand why the sun's atmosphere, so if this is sun and this is atmosphere of the sun, this is called corona, is significantly at a higher temperature compared to the surface of the sun. So this was basically analyzed, and then the answer was given in the form of Alfvén waves. So a recent study revealing distinct red and blue Doppler shifts confirms the presence of the Alfvén waves in the sun's corona. And this is the reason why the corona has severe higher temperature compared to its surface. So what are Alfvén waves? They are magnetic waves that travel across or along the sun's magnetic field lines, causing the plasma to oscillate sideways. They are believed to carry energy from the sun's surface into the corona, contributing. So this is the reason which contributes to high temperature. What is the significance of this study? It provides us information about the coronal heating, what leads to the heating of corona. It also helps us in solar wind acceleration, improved space weather forecasting, etc. And the last news for the day is Creative City of Gastronomy, where in the 43rd session of UNESCO's General Conference, they have named Lucknow as Creative City of Gastronomy. Gastronomy means that it is part of the food or the other culinary aspects. As part of UNESCO Creative Cities Network, UCCN, it was held in Samarkand. Now you tell me, where is Samarkand located? So it is the second Indian city which has got the Creative City of Gastronomy within India, apart from Hyderabad. So Lucknow and Hyderabad both are part of Creative City as far as gastronomy is concerned. So let's talk about what is UCCN, that is UNESCO Creative Cities Network. It was created in 2004 to strengthen cooperation with and among the cities that have recognized creativity as a strategic force of sustainable development. It can be for various fields. It's not just limited to gastronomy. It is also for, in fact, it is for 7 fields, which can be crafts and folk arts, design, film, gastronomy, literature, music, and media arts. Right? So this is all about the news today. Make sure that you provide your answer in the comment section. Thank you so much and all the best.